How can an artist be unique in visual effects when visual effects has become an industry for creating realism? Introduction. I intend to investigate what is a visual effect, the different jobs in a visual effects companies, and what we can learn nowadays from historical visual effects. I will explore the work of current individual and past visual effects artists. Some examples are those of the makers of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, who integrated 2D animation with live action, George Méliès, one of the first visual effects artists, and Zach King, a popular Vine artist who makes short visual effects and puts them online. What is a visual effect? Everyone seems to have a different definition, which only goes to show that the term's exact meaning is hard to pin down. Even the Visual Effects Society hasn't come up with a satisfactory definition. A few slight varying definitions of a visual effect are adding elements to a picture that are not there or removing something that you don't want to be there, and digital compositing plays a key role in all visual effects. Compositing is the creative process of assembling and combining filmed or rendered elements from multiple sources to create a lifelike illusion or fantastical visual effects delivered as a set of stills or moving pictures. A visual effect is the manipulation of moving images by photographic or digital means that creates a photorealistic cinematic illusion that does not exist in the real world. I agree with Steve Wright's definition of what visual effects are. I will use this definition of what a visual effects is throughout my work. Compositor. Compositors seamlessly integrate all the layers or elements of a shot, including live action and computer graphic elements. Compositors work closely with visual effects supervisors and CG supervisors to composite the numerous elements that complete visual effects shots. So for example, a compositor is given all the pieces needed to make a shot and they have to put it all together, whilst keeping colour, pacing, spacing, and that everything in the shot is consistent with the last shot in mind, like a really complicated jigsaw puzzle. A compositor is required to know how to approach the shot, how to execute the shot, and how to achieve the final shot. They also need to know what people wanted for each shot, and how the final product should look. There are two types of compositing, node-based and layer-based. Node-based compositing shows the composite as a tree structure, in which media objects and effects are linked together in a procedural map that sets out the process from raw input to the finished product. Layer-based compositing represents each media object in a composite as a separate layer within the timeline. These layers are then progressively rendered one on top of the other. Node-based is much more complicated than layer-based compositing, but it works more efficiently with larger products because you don't need multiple nodes like you do with layers, which means you only need one node doing very complicated jobs rather than 3 layers, which slows down the process and render time down significantly for the layer project. Digital matte painter. DPM artists are responsible for creating photorealistic images, elements or textures that match into live action footage or can stand alone. DMP work can also be used in the creation of 3D environments either by individual artists or part of a team. A digital matte painter needs to know how the image would appear through the camera. There's also the possibility of the camera moving, which means that the background would also have to move. A knowledge of how objects move at different speeds depending on how far away they are is important in camera movement. This can be remedied by 3D backgrounds that move like a camera or 2.5D and have a good eye for detail. Particle artists. Particle artists are much more varying than the other jobs in visual effects companies. They can be flames, explosions, clouds, anything that many of one thing need to be created but at random places and followed whatever physical properties they are given. The use of software, coding and or engines to randomly generate an object that has specific physical effects placed upon it to make it react like a real-life liquid, gas, solid and plasma. Tracking. Having something follow something else in the scene. Tracking can also mean tracking cameras. For example, I could track the movements of a camera taking a shot, then make a generated camera in Maya make the same movement so that the object in Maya can be placed in the original shot and move with their objects appropriately. This is called matchmaking. Roto artists. Roto artists in the visual effects company would rotoscope things in and out of shots by using specific software. Rotoscope in animation is drawn over a character to make movement. Rotoscope can be used to remove wires, replace backgrounds, take people out of, or add to a shot. There are different methods for rotoscoping. Removing by using the clone tool or paint frame by frame. This is the most time consuming, and the clone tool might work for one frame that might look out of place for another. Patching on top. This is where you find the background in a different shot without the object in shot, and then cut the background out and place it over the original shot to make the object disappear. This creates a static fill, meaning that it has no grain and noise and would be noticeable, but there are methods to put grain and noise back in. Another method is to take another clip of the scene without the object later on and use that in the scene, but the lighting can be different and other objects could have moved between scenes. Stabilize and paint back. This is like using the clone tool on layers, except it's done with frames. You would use the frame before to paint over the object in the next frame. This works best for wires and small objects. Roto clone tools / source nodes. This is using the software to roto out objects using nodes rather than painting it. Sometimes it's better to rotoscope the individual characters out and put them in a new background than to remove big chunks of background which then have to be replaced. 3D backgrounds can also be used to allow complex camera movements. Individual visual effects artists. George Méliès, A Trip to the Moon, 1902. I decided to take a look into the past, briefly to see who inspired the beginning of visual effects. I chose George Méliès because he is one of the most well-known traditional visual effects artists. The scene where the rocket is forced into the moon's face is the logo for the Visual Effects Society. The majority of visual effects are painted backgrounds or painted foregrounds. It contains some jump cuts and a little bit of smoke. The thing that makes this impressive is that no computers were used to help them make this, so everything in the shot was real. I don't think anything has been added in or any footage laid on top of the original. It must have been revolutionary at the time, but compared to modern visual effects, this film would be very easy to create. Thanks to the internet and cheaper software, over the years more and more visual effects artists are able to create and show their work to people across the world. Black Hawk on YouTube add explosions and blood to previously filmed animal videos such as BBC Bat Crocodile Wars, which he has edited with lasers and explosions. Danny and Michael Philippou, I apologise if I got that wrong, are two wannabe filmmakers on a rampage. According to them, they do skits with small visual effects like gunfire and showing skeletons inside of a person whilst it's being broken. Megizical? Megizical? Megizical is what I'm going to go with. Megizical makes videos for YouTube using footage he recorded himself and animating a realistic looking insect into it. This works so well because he reacts to the insect. It becomes more believable because it looks like something anyone could have recorded. It is also more believable because the insect is only on screen for a few seconds. A very famous visual effects artist is Zach King, who uses lots of different tricks to make brilliant vines. Some of his works are jump cuts, whilst others are distorting the user's view. A great example is teaching cats to play chess. In teaching cats to play chess, Zach has manipulated the viewpoint of the camera to make it look like the chessboard is on the table, when it is actually on the ground a few meters away. This visual effect made me wonder whether planning and manipulating reality in the original footage could also be considered as a visual effect, or if it had to be two or more moving images on top of each other. The artists above are very clearly using visual effects in live action footage that is either theirs or not. I will now look into other artists that might not define himself or herself as visual effects artists. These artists have created work which could be considered as visual effects depending on your definition of visual effects. So to find uniqueness in visual effects, I have decided to include these artists. Super David's visual effects are animating faces onto footage to personified inanimate objects. He normally has little faces reacting to what's going on in the GIFs. He also seems to choose popular GIFs to add his effects to. Visual effect companies. There are many visual effects companies around nowadays, creating beautiful and stunning art for TV and the film industries. The question is, are these companies unique? These companies are probably more unique than the individual artists above because they employ many artists to come up with new ideas for advertisements, music videos, or even charity events. BBC's Children in Need is an example of a visual effect for charity because you could argue that rotoscoping is drawn on top of real footage. One of my favourite visual effects is the Pope's tablecloth trick. Sadly, I can't seem to find out who actually made this brilliant piece of work, but I do know that it was made for the Ellen DeGeneres show. Who Framed Roger Rabbit is an animated movie that heavily relies on visual effects. The best part of Who Framed Roger Rabbit is that everything apart from the 2D animated characters are done in front of the camera. To help the actors in Roger Rabbit, they had the actors practice with puppets beforehand, so that they knew where the character will be and where to look when there was nothing in front of them. They created a rig that had a robot mimic the movements of a human arm so that they could have a cigar moving in the air for the 2D character to hold and the smoke with. This would animate the 2D character on top of the robot but leave the cigar in the character's hand so it looked like he was holding a real cigar. They used puppeteers to move objects that would be held by characters so that they didn't have to rotoscope anything out. The only thing that was being moved was the thing that the character was holding. They also used puppeteers because they would know how to make it look like the object was being held by someone that was alive and moving. Shadow mats were made for the characters and then add different lighting colours to match the shading of the environment the characters are in. Lord of the Rings. A clever use of forced perspective to make the characters look like one character is bigger than the other. How can an artist be unique in visual effects when visual effects has become an industry for creating realism? Conclusion. I believe that visual effects is also the manipulation of objects on screen. An example would be having multiples of the same object in a scene but on different sizes in different shots. Manipulating the camera, forced perspective, could also be considered a visual effect. Rather than just adding elements to a picture that are not there or removing something that you don't want to be there, by Steve Wright. I learned about a lot of things I didn't know about when searching through the job description requirements, like how much a compositor needs to interact with other members of the departments so that they know where everything belongs in the final shot. A digital map painter needs to know how the image would appear through the camera and how different lenses on the camera might affect the perspective. I learned a lot more than I expected to when I researched job descriptions, and I feel like I understand what is needed from each specific job and what each individual artist needs to be in order to fit into the company. It seems that individual visual effects artists focus on one talent, like making insects, performing skits, or making similar GIFs. This is probably because of two reasons. One reason would be that they want to become well known online. Repeating the same thing over is a smart way to make people notice them. This is because people tend to look at something and then quickly forget, but if they continuously see the same thing repeatedly, then they are more likely to wonder who made it and look up the artist, thus making the artist more popular. The other reason would be so that the artists got really good at one specific area, so that they could show off their work at a company and be able to get possible work. Companies, on the other hand, have to do the exact opposite and are always trying to come up with clever new adverts for companies. This can be very simple visual effects to extremely complex ones. The best way to be unique in visual effects is to find the one thing that you can do best and do it well. Then learn how to do little of compositing so that you can make something which you can show off to get into the company. Once there, you'll be able to make something amazing, like Who Framed Roger Rabbit.